I think there's a problem when someone like Piers Morgan's a journalist with a wide audience, platforms, and goes on Candace Owens' show. She's an individual who's been named Anti-Semite of the Year by Stop Anti-Semitism, an organisation dedicated to combating anti-Semitism globally. And Morgan's move to give credibility to Owens raises profound questions about the responsibilities of influential media figures, the normalization of hate speech, the broader implications for society of such choices. Now, of course, I am all for giving a platform to anyone to express views, but I find it disturbing. Morgan has had people on his program who have stated emphatically that they don't believe the Holocaust involved the killing of 6 million Jews, that number must be smaller. This is outrageous. And I think when historical facts are questioned, we need to stand up and we need to say this isn't this isn't true, and this is wrong, and this is, in addition, this is offensive. This isn't about free speech. This is about putting forward distortions of history that are fundamentally offensive. It can't be explained away as satire or as a provocative options for discussion. It is simply offensive, an offensive distortion of history. And I was putting up stuff the other day about censorship. Of course, I entirely disapprove of censorship. And I think we want to hear these appalling ideas because we need to know what we're facing, what is being said. It's absurd to silence people, but they need to be challenged and held to account. Now, in some ways, Piers Morgan does this. In some ways, he also gives people an opportunity to promote their vile distortions. Let's begin with Owens herself. The Stop Anti-Semitism's designation was not a frivolous act. It was the result of a litany of inflammatory statements and actions. She dismissed the horrors of Nazi medical experiments as propaganda, a position that's not only historically inaccurate, but a textbook example of Holocaust denial. All you have to do is look into the stories of Mengele to know that what she is saying is complete rubbish. She's perpetuated myths about Jewish control of Hollywood and global politics, again echoing centuries-old dangerous tropes, which, of course, led directly to the Holocaust and to the pogroms in Russia. Perhaps most disturbingly, she invoked the long-debunked accusation of ritualistic child murder against Leo Frank, a Jewish man lynched in 1915, a dark moment in American history. These aren't isolated incidents, but part of a pattern designed to stoke division, disinformation, and hatred. And so you have to ask, why then would Piers Morgan, a journalist who claims to champion free speech and rigorous debate, choose to engage with Owens without holding her accountable for her track record? To some, Morgan represents a modern provocateur seeking to stir controversy to boost his own ratings. But when controversy tips into providing a megaphone for bigotry and the distortion of history, the stakes are actually higher. Morgan's defence of his platforming strategy often relies on free speech as a cornerstone of democracy, but free speech does not imply the obligation to amplify harmful ideologies. And Morgan, who claims to oppose woke madness, risks becoming a selective arbiter of what constitutes legitimate speech versus what is an endorsement of hate. And Owens' platforming isn't just about her. It speaks to the normalization of extreme rhetoric in mainstream discourse and harmful rhetoric. By engaging with her on equal terms, Morgan lends legitimacy to her narratives, allowing them to seep into public consciousness under the guise of debate. This is particularly damaging when the rhetoric includes Holocaust distortion and conspiracy theories, ideologies with demonstrable links to violence and harm to society. Moreover, this normalization feeds into a cycle where those espousing hate speech are portrayed as martyrs of cancel culture, bolstering their own followings. Owens has already weaponized her designation as anti-Semite of the year, framing it as an attack on her freedom to criticize Israeli policies. Criticizing Israel and the Israeli leadership does not necessarily make somebody into an anti-Semite. Denying the Holocaust does. And while criticism, therefore, of any government is valid, Owens conflates legitimate criticism with her anti-Semitic rhetoric, muddying the waters and providing a shield for prejudice. Legitimate political discourse includes robust debate about Israeli politics, particularly in the light of recent conflicts. But Owens' comments, such as accusing Israel of carrying out the November the 7th massacre, which is absurd, or reviving medieval blood libel, which is deeply shocking, transcend criticism. They're not about policies, but about demonizing a group of people simply because of their race. And that is racist, and it is anti-Semitic. The distinction matters. Figures like Owens obscure this line, exploiting genuine grievances to propagate hateful myths and to pick up harmful propaganda-infused tropes from the past. By giving her credibility, Morgan risks undermining the very journalistic principles he claims to uphold. Piers Morgan's decision to engage with Candace Owens without adequately challenging her rhetoric is emblematic of a larger failure in our society to address the consequences of platforming hate. And while free speech is vital, and while I think particularly satire, whether it's done with a straight face or whether it's done with a wink and a nod, it must not be weaponized to shield those who perpetuate harm. And journalists and media figures carry immense responsibility in shaping public discourse. And this episode is a cautionary tale of what happens when that responsibility is neglected. The fight against anti-Semitism, like all forms of hatred, like Islamophobia, requires vigilance, not just from watchdog organizations, but from all of us, particularly those with a platform. In amplifying Owens, Morgan may well have provided fuel to a fire that burns the very fabric of a free and tolerant society. I don't say lightly that somebody should be muted, but I think that if they are going to speak, they need to be challenged directly, and held to account for the things that they have said, and that is something that I think Piers Morgan is well placed to do, but for some reason that's not what comes across.